Hello everyone, Mark Latham here. Thought I'd do a quick report on something that's been in our papers the last few days, and on reading it, I read it a couple of times and I thought there's something slightly different about this report. It's to do with child sex abuse, but what this report actually brought out was something that a lot of reports don't actually get to the bottom of, and this one did. And I thought what I'd do is read this case to you. It's nationally known now. It's been in all of the tabloids and the broadsheet papers. This guy here was prosecuted recently and is now awaiting sentence. What I like to do is just read it and then give a slight explanation as to why I think this one's slightly revealing, a bit more revealing, about the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. And so here goes. See what you think. This is from July 2013. Jehovah's Witnesses hushed up child sex abuse. Church officials hushed up a child sex scandal in their ranks and refused to cooperate with police. Refused to cooperate with police. Jehovah's Witness ministerial servant Gordon Layton admitted sexually abusing a child when he was confronted by his church elders, a court heard. But during the official police investigation, the 53-year-old who made headlines in the 1990s when wife Yvonne, 28, died after refusing a blood transfusion after childbirth on religious grounds, denied any illegal wrongdoing. And when detectives asked elders Simon Pracer, Harry Logan and David Scott to make statements about the confession, all three refused and said what they had heard was confidential. For 3 years the elders refused to cooperate with the criminal investigation and kept up that stance when the case was brought before Newcastle Crown Court after the victim made a complaint to police. Each was issued with a witness summons which they fought to overturn before being ordered to testify by Judge Penny Morland, citing public interest. Their barrister, Richard Daniels, said the men had a duty to God not to breach confidence. He added, privileged communication between members of the congregation and ministers is an absolute right and duty, and there is no power in law to breach such a confidence. Judge Morland said, it is apparent that the three elders who were present when this conversation took place are in possession of relevant evidence as to a point which is of real significance in this case. They claimed the right of confidentiality. They claimed that what they heard said by the defendant during the course of that meeting ought to be subject to privilege as ministers of religion. Judge Morland refused to withdraw the summonses and said public interest is clearly in favour of this evidence being given. What was said by the defendant on that occasion is of great significance in the trial, she said. Despite the judge's ruling, the men still refused to make statements to police until just hours before they were called before the jury. Let me read that again. Despite the judge's ruling, the men still refused to make statements to police until just hours before they were called before the jury. Layton, who has since been expelled from the church at Lambert Kingdom Hall in Washington, denied 2 charges of indecency with a child and 7 of indecent assault. He was yesterday found guilty of 2 charges of indecency with a child and 6 of indecent assault. he was found not guilty of one indecent assault charge on the direction of the judge. He was remanded in custody until he is sentenced next month, but warned he is facing a lengthy spell behind bars. Prosecutor Catherine Dunn told the court the victim, who is now an adult, broke her silence in 2009. The court heard how at a special church meeting, Leighton admitted sexual abuse and made excuses for his behaviour. Miss Dunn said the elders conducted their own investigation. A meeting was arranged and the defendant was confronted with the allegations. After initially denying the allegations, he broke down and admitted sexually abusing the complainant. The court heard Leighton of Witchen Close, Ayton, refused to answer any questions when interviewed by detectives and claimed his confession at the meeting was limited to masturbation and reading pornographic material. Throughout the 6-day trial, Leighton denied all allegations and that he had confessed to the elders, telling jurors, "It never happened. It's all untrue." Leighton had also denied unrelated assault charges which he was found guilty of. Interesting. This is just another child sex case within the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. But what the public are now reading from this, and is now relevant to today, is that even hours just before the jury were to hear from these three men, the elders, these ministers, the clergy type, as they would be called by the outside world, they had information, all three of them. There were 3 witnesses, not 2 witnesses, 3 witnesses to this information. The courts decided that this was in the public interest, and the judge made it very clear that they were to, under oath, come out and reveal what this man, Mr. Leighton, had confessed to. And they refused, and they refused, and they refused. For 3 years they refused. They fought it all the way. The reason they refused it is because they were being advised by the legal department of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, most probably from London. Maybe it was being transmitted back to New York. The fact of the matter is that although the courts had made it very clear that this information was of the public interest and that they were now being basically subpoenaed into a position where they had to confess what the confessor had revealed to them, but they still refused right up to the last minute. Now, this is interesting because it reveals a great deal about the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. It reveals that when truth needs to be brought out regarding such a serious case against a child, when the individual has confessed to 3 elders, when the elders then have that information and the police want that information, they will not cooperate with the police and they would not cooperate with the court system until they were absolutely hammered with it, and they would have been punished themselves for not taking it any further and cooperating. Now, this doesn't sound to me like an organisation that is in subjection to the authorities, does it? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. Just in case anybody needs reminding of this, if you are a Jehovah's Witness, please be honest with yourself here. If you're an elder or a ministerial servant, please listen very carefully to this Bible. Your New World Translation will say very much the same thing. This is the English Standard Version that I have in front of me. And this is what it says in Romans chapter 13, verses that you know very, very well. Let every person be in subjection to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. And verse 5 says this, interestingly, therefore one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. Interesting. Now, if you think about this a little bit deeper and look at the layers of this, it's very clear that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society does not have a conscience. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society is not in subjection to the authorities. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society has one goal in mind with a case like this, and that is to keep it quiet, to hold it back, to cover it up, to put it in the shadows where it belongs, so as not to besmirch the good name of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. But as these cases keep coming up, it's proving more and more difficult for the society itself to keep this stuff under wraps. I think everybody is becoming very conscious of the fact that no matter how hard the prosecutors try to bring these to bear and to bring justice to the child, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society will do its very best to cover this up and use any legal statute that they can to keep it well heeled within their control. So what this reveals to me is that this is once again a very deeply controlling, high control organization. It's not in subjection to the authorities. From distance, it can control responsible men who will follow it to the letter, even though probably deep in their own consciences they're feeling very nervous about what they're doing. And what I would say to those brothers, and brothers also that are like it all over the world, you've seen there in Romans 13 verse 5 that it talks about conscience. Your conscience is to reveal this to the authorities. Why? Because they want it. The police want it. The law wants it. And it wants it to protect the child. You, on the other hand, have lost the point of what you were trying to do in the first place. All the way through this, you're arguing that it is about confidentiality. But there are two overriding areas that you have not considered correctly. One is the safety of the child. Even though you had this confession, nothing happened with it, did it? Otherwise, something would have been done a long time ago. And secondly, you're not in subjection to the authorities. And therefore, you have no conscience. Therefore, you are incurring the wrath of God, according to Scripture, aren't you? So those are the deeper, more analytical sides to this case, rather than just looking at the horrendous act of the indecent assaults and molestation of this child. We see an organisation that is working its socks off to make sure that it protects itself at the cost of the elders, at the cost of this poor child. And the authorities have to work doubly hard just to get to the bottom of something that should have been a very simple case. 3 men listening to a man confess to them in a private room. When subpoenaed to this, they should have then revealed it, but they didn't. They held it back. They fought it tooth and nail. They were dragged kicking and screaming into court. That reveals a lot to me. And so to all of those brothers and sisters, if you have children in your congregations, please be aware that your organisation, although claiming to love children and although claiming that it wants to protect the children and it has a child protection policy, when these things eventually go to court, it will do whatever it needs to do to make it go away. We also know of the terrible pressure that many families are put under of the victim, of the child itself, where elders, these same elders who've listened to a confession, and this has been reported many, many times, will apply pressure, congregational pressure, to the parents of the child to say that there was only one witness. We must trust in Jehovah. These are the scriptures that we are using, Deuteronomy chapter 19 verse 15 I believe it is, and we must wait on Jehovah. and the family member then, or parents, will feel under extreme pressure to comply with that. And in a lot of cases they have been threatened that they are divisive within the congregation if they were to report this to the police, that there isn't enough evidence and that this shouldn't be going any further. This is exactly what the two-witness rule does on a situation like this. It fails miserably. It doesn't comply with justice at all. When it comes to child sex, molestation and rape, the two-witness rule is a sham. And what it does, it reveals that there is no real child protection policy at all for children within the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. And also it reveals very clearly that they have to hide behind their own secrecy laws and claim that it's some form of privilege, and therefore they are in breach of Romans chapter 13 and being in subjection to the laws of the land. So that's where I want to leave it, but as I said, I would encourage others to look very deeply and look at the different layers that are going on here with regards to the analytical side of this particular case and many others, where control is their lord and where they will do anything to make sure that this goes no further. You can receive more information from Silent Lambs. You can also look up Stephen Unthank and the big fight he had in Australia with some of the cases over there in Victoria, Australia, where the society in court on oath, we've now got it in transcript, actually admitted to not even having a faithful and discreet slave, and also denying that there were even Jehovah's Witnesses in Victoria. These were the lengths that they were trying to go to scupper the justices and the justice system within Victoria, Australia. They know no bounds. One thing, and I've reiterated this, that I'd just like to leave it on, that Romans chapter 13 is something that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society is in clear breach of. Make no mistake about that. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.